Okay, as I mentioned in the previous presentation, we looked at the different ways of making animations. In that case, we used a real photo and broke the photo up into segments. The great thing is that you can actually create your own objects in Flash as well. So what I've set here is I've pasted in or inserted this bitmap of a dragonfly. So this is actually a photo of the dragonfly. I'm not going to use this in my final content. Much like any artist who draws something, you usually refer to a real-life object to get your image. However, digitally, we have an advantage here. Okay, so I'm going to first rename the layer that the image went onto as background for the moment. You could call this image source or something else that has an appropriate name, and I'm going to lock it because we don't want to touch this anymore. It's just there as a reference. Then in this layer is where I'm going to start playing around with drawing the dragonfly. Now, the tools have changed slightly with Animate, so we're looking at a Flash version, and I'm only going to keep it at Flash because that's what's on the school computers at the moment. You could use your pen tools. However, with the line tool in Flash, it's just as easy. So to introduce you to the pen tool, I'm going to start with the line tool. Black is not going to be a good color. So I've selected line tool, but you look at the fill and stroke, it's black. We're not really going to be able to see it to start with. Ultimately, your lines will be deleted. So it doesn't matter what color you choose. I'm going to choose something that will show up against the background. Just the same principles as that butterfly, we need to break our object up into the animated components. So with the dragonfly, how many components do you think this would be broken up into? Yep. Five? What would they be?
The 4 wings and the body.
Yep, that's correct. You could, if you wanted to, make it 6 if you wanted the head to move as well. Maybe look around and things like that. But 5 would be my minimum. So you're absolutely right. So I need to draw those components separately. Now the key to doing this is looking at the curves. So you look at where the line changes direction. So that curve's there, then it creates another curve here. It doesn't have to be precise because really this is just using the graphic as a reference. Now it looks like I'm just doing a really rough square version of it. I'm going to go past the edge of the wing and I'll explain why later. Now as you go around there's a snapping tool. It's a bit hard to see here, but a little circle appears when it's going to snap into place. And the great thing about that is it means that it is now an enclosed shape. When I go over to my paint bucket, I now can decide on my fills. I'll make it blue, but you can also play with transparencies and things if you want. So there's your alpha is a transparency. So I could bring that down a bit if I want it to be a little bit clear against the background. And I fill in there and you can see I've now got this rough wing shape. Now if I go over to my selection tool, I can go to these lines that I created and notice when I hover over it I get that little curved line around the cursor. So if I click and drag while that's active, I can pull it into shape to mimic what's there. And that leaves me a cartoon wing. Very minimal drawing skills. All I needed to understand though was I needed a line to represent every curve that you see on the edges. So I've got that. I don't really like this line on the outside though. So I'm going to double click. Oops, I meant to have that one. Double click. When you double click, it selects the entire line, not a segment. If you do a single click, and I'll zoom in so you can see that, you'll see that it's got that little dotted selection aspect to it. And I'll press delete. I now have a clean single wing that I've created. This is now original content. I'm not using someone else's content, and this is something you've got to get away from. I could, if I wanted to, add more lines in there. As long as I'm not going to shape tween it, I could put in all the veins of the wings by copying over those. If you want to get into that detail, you can go for your life. This is a vector graphic, so I can resize it however I want. That's the other great thing about this. But what I need to do now is actually turn it into a graphic. So the same process again. You right click, convert to a symbol, and we choose graphic. Okay. I'll turn my butterfly back on so we can see it as a reference. Now the great thing is I could just delete this off the stage and use this layer again to make another component of the butterfly. But what I might do is duplicate this, and I'll name it this time. I should have named it the first time. I'll call this wing left top. If I drag that on there, use the transform tool, I can just flick it around. Now obviously you could go up and use flip horizontally as well. And again, I've zoomed out. If you zoom in, you get far more control. So I can just sort of try and get a general mimic of this. And you'll see now that it's moving far better in terms of controlling it. So it's almost a pixel by pixel movement. Doesn't have to be precise. We're not copying something. We're using it as a reference. You can embellish this wing as much as you like once you've got your general shape. So I now have these two components. But I don't really need to do that yet. I'm just keeping them separate. So I've got my symbol for wing, top wings if you want. I now need my bottom wing, so I can just delete that. You'll see in my library, the bottom wing's still there. Because I've already demonstrated that part, I'll just do the body and do a really quick example. Now you can see here there's lots and lots of curves. You could make this up with the shapes in Flash as well. So I'll give you an example here. If I just went, there's my eye there and an eye here. Yeah, he's a bit cross-eyed, this one. And I now go to select that little segment in there. You'll notice that when I click on it, where it intersects, it doesn't take it all out. So you can use those shapes to overlap and then remove lines as necessary. This is just sort of general art skills occurring without you having to use the pencil. And whenever you do things in art, they'll say, okay, find the general shapes first, don't worry about the detail. And that's exactly the same philosophy here. So, pretty weird bug eyes, but I'm going to live with that. I'll take that part out. I know it's not correct, but like I said, it doesn't have to be. I could probably go straight across because that's a direct curve. I'll go there. You'll notice that it still snaps into the eyeball as well, even though I remove the lines. I'd remove the lines at the end. I was just showing you how they could be removed in segments there. Now, another thing you could consider, when I want to do my paint fill, maybe I want some of the colours that are available to me. So rather than using your colour picker here, I might go, well, I actually like that green on its nose. So the little dropper appears when you hover over it, and I I can now use the green that was there. Now I do have a problem here. What's the problem? Yeah, I left the transparency on. So just be mindful of that. I'm now going to first off sort of bend it into position. I'm not going to worry about here, and you'll see why in a moment. Get rid of that segment there. Go back to my paint fill, and I can fill in that area. And, oops, don't want to delete that bit. I'm now getting that shape there. Yeah, it's not a very good one. Would have been better to probably use lines rather than shapes in this case. However, if I hover over the edge of this circle, I can start pulling it into shape. So don't panic too much about where you are. The beauty of using the computer technology here is nothing's permanent. It's not like you've got to rub things out. You can transform it and keep refining as you go. And if I start moving this around, you'll see that the colour will fill according to where the line goes. So these are some of the nice techniques of getting this right. Now with these eyeballs, I don't like them at this point. I probably would have been better keeping them separate, because one of the other things you can do with your fill is choose the gradient fills as well. So I could have given it a shininess at points. So let's do that. It shouldn't be really shiny there though. If I go over to my transform tool and hold it down, you'll see the gradient transform tool. So if I select that, I can actually change where this is occurring. So you can almost give it a direction of light if you want to. And by the way, this can be animated where that sits. So you can actually have a light source change over an object using your shape tween. So just keep that in mind. Now you might go, yeah, it's black though. Well, over here, you'll see my gradient colors can be changed. So if I double click on the black, it opens up the other possibilities. Ooh, that's a bit bright, but I can bring it down to whatever colors I want, or I can go for, there should be a, no, it's not going to let me do the dropper there, but that's okay. Oh, there we are. I can choose colors from the object. Unfortunately, it's done it as a full fill though. So gradient tool's got a little less control over that, but you can see how you can use the gradient tool to create tones as well within things. So I'm just going to undo that. Keep it like this for the moment, because we've got one more thing to do, and I'm going to do it very quickly and roughly. Starting from the edge of the eye there. Do one line there. I'm going to just move a line in a bit obviously there, because there's a little bit of a curve in there and there's a curve here. I don't really care about the body as such, but so it's not going to let me do it. I need to zoom out there so I can see the rest of it. This is going to be a very rough dragonfly, but I'm hoping you can start seeing how again, oops. Again, you can see how useful it is to zoom in at times, because I lost control of the pixels then, and it was really jumping around to snap in. Okay. Notice that you can sort of bend as well. I'm not just curving out, I can sort of change where that arc goes. And come out for that one. And there we go. Turn off. Oops. Turn off that, and there's the body. Okay. Again, select all of it. Now, you can select all like that, but sometimes it gets a bit clumsy when you've got lots of layers. A good way of selecting a whole object in a layer is just click on its keyframe, and that will grab everything as well. Same thing again. Convert to a symbol. Oops. Again, it's a graphic. First off. All right, I'm ready now to construct the Dragonfly movie clip. So I'll grab a wing on there. Might even bring the reference back just so I can see generally where things are. And hold that down to go back to free transform tool. Just going to flick it. Now, normally I'd redraw one of these bottom wings, but for the sake of speed, we're just going to do it this way. Just going to flip it like that. And move my pivot point to there. Again, you notice that I'm not really that concerned about making an exact copy. It's just a reference. And of course, I can then go Control C, Control V. Using the keyboard, I can get precise movements. Now I don't need this anymore. I've still got a problem though. Yep. Yeah, the wings are sort of up the top, which might ruin the illusion a bit. You could leave them there if you wanted to, because, I mean, I guess technically the wings are coming out of that section. So it all depends what your preference is. So if you need to do that, you can actually just do what you find in Word, and you should be able to change the arrangement and send it to the back. And so now it goes underneath the body for the sake of making it look nice. The quicker way, go to the body, bring it to the front, and it's in front of everything. Okay? Bit of a warped Dragonfly, but it's an original. I can say it's an original. I've now got all my components. I select all of it. What was another way I could have selected? Keyframe, yep. Then I right click and I turn this into what? Into a movie clip. Yeah, and I can call it Dragonfly. Okay. So now I've got my Dragonfly movie clip. This is where I can go in, do what you've done before, insert the keyframe. Move my pivot point in. All this again, like you did with the butterfly. You could also move them around if you want to give them a bit more of a natural look. But this will be my quick version. So again, insert a keyframe, which will do a copy of the previous keyframe. Back in again. And to be honest, I don't know how dragonflies really flap their wings. It's a bit fast. So this one's gone off a bit, so put that in there. I can now copy this frame because it's just going to reverse. Paste it in there. Copy this frame. Paste it in here. If I go, I think in your case it's Control Enter, you can see that that's flapping. However, what's happened? That's right. Even though my background layer is not visible, it's still part of my project and on the stage. So once you've finished with it, get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. Okay, it's still there for reference if you ever want to pull it in the library, but do that. Okay, so that's a recap. We use the graphics for the objects. So whenever you create an object, turn it into a graphic. Anything you want to automatically animate, you turn into a movie clip. Now, going back into, this is going to be the tricky bit, so you've got to listen here. Going back into my movie clip, I'm going to go to this frame here, copy all my components, then go back out. I can take that off the stage because it's already been made into a movie clip. Paste again. This time I'm going to convert it to something slightly different. I'm actually going to make it a graphic again, and there's a reason for this. I'll call this butterfly. Oh, it's not a butterfly, it's Dragonfly. See, I'm remembering my old one. Dragonfly up. And this will make sense in a moment. So, I've got this graphic here called Dragonfly up. Right, that's all great. I'm now going to convert this into a button. Start making conventions for naming your symbols, because you will get a lot of similar names, but we need to know when we're drawing them out of the library what their function is. So I put a BTN in there. Go OK. Now if I double click on this, it's going to do something different. And I want to see whether you notice what the difference is. What's that? Yeah, it looks like that. Look, I don't know whether you can see it that clearly, actually. Yeah, it's annoying. Up here, there's a difference in the timeline. Okay? Because of the grey background and the quality of this projector, you can't quite see the change in the timeline. It actually has up, over, down, and hit as keyframes. It's named them. Now, this might be a bit of an issue for the demonstration, but I'll explain as I go over each one. This keyframe here is what's called the up keyframe. When a button's sitting on a screen in any sort of website or application, it's in what we call an up state because it hasn't been pressed down. So we get that concept of a button, a physical button. The next keyframe is the down state. Oh, sorry, the over state. So you have an over state, which means you're rolling your mouse over the button. If I right click on there and insert a keyframe, it's going to put my graphic in there. But I don't want the graphic. I'm going to go back to my library and pull in my movie clip. Okay. I'll go back to my scene. Control Enter, nothing's happening except when I roll over. This is the beginning of creating behavioral animations, interactive animations. They're animations that the user is now controlling. What I'd suggest you do in the rest of this double is see whether you can make that button. Think about how you can utilize the interactive animations in your storybook. A great one I had once was a Where's Wally storybook that was interactive. They made lots of the screen interactive, but there was a little tiny point in it that if you got the right one, Wally would pop up as a result, waving. So you can use these ideas of the interactivity. I haven't done any coding yet. I haven't made it do anything as a button other than the rollover. So you need to get that sense first. The hierarchy of things are anything that's static, that's an object you're going to use within a movie clip or within a button, needs to be a graphic. Okay? Whether it's the combination of graphics or components of a movie clip. So you need to get that hierarchy right first. Create your graphics, create your movie clips, then create your buttons. Create your buttons based on your graphics. Be very careful not to make a movie clip of a movie clip. Once you start sort of nesting, as they call it, those sorts of things, you run into all sorts of problems trying to control your animations. So keep them all separate. Make sure you're clear on what they're trying to do. So what I'm going to give you as a task today is make an interactive animation. It doesn't have to be as complex as that Dragonfly. I was mostly showing you that just to recap the animation aspects. Think about shape tween. Think about position on screen. What happens if I do a rollover and it jumps over somewhere else? You can make a very frustrating storybook where they roll over things and it jumps all over the screen if you want to. But play around with the concept of the interactive animation. Okay?